So this review has to begin with a bit of story time. Back in 2011, a little known game hit the shelves called Skyrim. You probably haven't heard of it, but it's essentially an RPG where you have to fight against Thomas the Tank Engine. While never hitting the mainstream, Skyrim did attract a very small cult following of about 15 or 20 million people, and some of those people made mods for Skyrim. Most of these were, of course, very minor tweaks to the base game, more quality of life improvements than anything else, like this mod that makes some subtle changes to the game's character creator. Some of these mods were more ambitious, aiming to offer up expansion-like experiences, complete with new areas to explore, fully voiced characters, and lengthy narrative-led quest chains. One of the most celebrated of these mods was called the Forgotten City. In it, your character is lulled into an ancient ruin and discovers the remains of a hanged man, who seemingly took his own life, leaving behind a warning.
To whoever reads this, I have spent a lifetime in this place, going around and around in circles, searching for a way out. But there are only two choices: death or the door to the house on the lake.
Through the menacing door lies not only a place, but a place in time. You're transported back to when this ancient ruin was a small but thriving city of 20 people. There's a mystery afoot here, and only you can solve it because you alone possess the ability to travel through time, resetting the clock at the start of each day whenever you please to begin tugging at new threads when others have run their course. The mod was wildly successful, one of the most downloaded Skyrim mods of all time, with over 3 million downloads. But even more impressively, it won an Australian Writers Guild Award in the category of interactive media, the first mod to ever receive such an award. Buoyed by the incredible community feedback and this prestigious win, the mod's creator Nick Pierce put together a small core team of 3 people, supported by a number of others, and they decided to spin off their mod into its own standalone game. They spent the last 5 years doing that. They rebuilt the whole game in Unreal Engine, they adopted an entirely new setting, they rewrote most of the story except for a few key beats, and today the game will arrive on PC with PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch ports arriving later on. It's selling for around $40 for the console versions. Not sure about the PC price just yet, but it's going to be in that ballpark. That standalone game is the game I am reviewing for you today, The Forgotten City. I played it on PC. Now you may have noticed by this point, I like to put my recommendation in the title of a video. I recommend this. I do not recommend this. This is total garbage, etc. I haven't done that for this video because I'm sort of in neither camp. I don't necessarily recommend this, but nor am I like, no, don't play this. I think this title has some great elements, things that I really enjoyed, and really delivered what I hoped it would deliver when I booted it up. I will say that having spent the 10 or so hours to get through it, I certainly enjoyed this, no doubt about that. Having said that, there are definitely some shortcomings here. The small budget and small team size are certainly evident in the presentation, and I think that's going to prompt some people to bounce off this. There were a few gameplay and design choices made that really pile-drived my enjoyment at times, and they really pissed me off. Stuff that kind of really robbed me of the exploration, experimentation, and discovery that I think are central to an experience like this. In addition to all of that, I think I was a little bit victim to the high hopes I have for a game of this type, a time loop game. I'm obsessed with this stuff, especially after playing The Outer Wilds and The Sexy Brutale and Majora's Mask and any other game that touches on time travel mechanics. This format is so powerful from a gameplay perspective, and I think my biggest disappointment with The Forgotten City is that it doesn't really do much with the time loop mechanic, making the game a lot less mechanically interesting than it could have been. Let's not lose perspective though. This is the first game from an entirely new studio of 3 core team members. They worked their asses off for 5 years to make this, and I don't think anyone could come to the conclusion that they didn't succeed. The Forgotten City really does have some excellent stuff in there, stuff that a certain audience is going to love. It's just that there's a lot of other stuff in there that many people won't love, which makes offering up a straight recommendation a little bit tricky. Alright, enough preamble, let's review The Forgotten City.
Hey, you're alive. When I dragged you out of the river, I thought you were never gonna wake up.
The Forgotten City begins here. It's an opening that sets the scene for the game tonally, mechanically, and technically. You awaken by a riverside with no memory of how you got there and only some loose change in your pockets, so clearly we're in for a mystery of some sort. You also meet Karen, and yes, they do make some jokes about her name here, and you begin the dialogue interface that makes up a good 70% of what this game is, standing squarely before someone and conversing with them while they serve up exposition, answer your questions, and respond to your influence. Already, some of you are going to be tapping out based on the footage you're seeing. This is a game that is spent in large part in this very perspective, staring at people's faces. But unfortunately, the facial animation and lip sync, it isn't great. Faces lack convincing expressions, their blinking is weirdly mechanical, their eyes look like those eyes in those creepy dolls in those animatronic shows, and the lip syncing is really off. Obviously this is a small team, and convincing facial animations, they are not easy. I mean, large-scale studios have famously got this very wrong. So I get why we arrive here, but at the same time, it's the first big body blow when it comes to an experience like this. Since so much time is spent in this perspective, you have a lot of opportunity to observe this not working well. Given how many of the game's biggest reveals happen in these dialogue exchanges, a lot of those reveals lose their heft when you're staring at these lifeless robotic faces, awkwardly feigning human emotion one strained eyebrow raise at a time. Luckily, the technical aspects of the rest of the game are much stronger. I reviewed it on an RTX 3080 running at max settings. I had almost no issues with performance, one or two minor frame drops here and there, but that was really about it. I had no crashes at all, and I don't think I had any gameplay bugs except for this dude who, he definitely found a new way to sit down. Other than that though, it's all perfect. It's funny because this was actually a pre-review build I played, so there were further patches coming prior to release and probably a day one patch or whatever, I don't know, but the point is, even despite all of that, it was still really solid technically, so hats off to the team for that. One of the biggest strengths of the game is world design. You'll arrive at the ruins of the Forgotten City and navigate the devastation, and the smash cut into its thriving sun-kissed past is certainly transportive. It's set in a rather idealized version of the ancient Roman period, with palaces and villas and forums and temples. Even the slums look inviting in a cozy sort of way. The Forgotten City is very small, you can circumnavigate it in just a few minutes, but each of its landmarks play an important part in the unfolding story. Every inch of space is used meaningfully. Each new landmark you chance upon is a new stage on which one scene of this little play will unfold. You just need to find the right trigger to get that scene in motion. That's one of the things that the Forgotten City really nails: exploration, and more specifically the link between exploration and narrative. See, this is a non-linear adventure. There's multiple story beats to hit throughout, but a lot of those can be done in any order. The way you can accomplish these is through either a narrative prompt or through simply exploring the world. You may speak to an NPC who informs you that an important item you need is at a specific location, or you may just chance upon that item yourself as you explore. You may not even know that a critical NPC exists until you meet them, hidden away at the bottom of some cave or at the farthest corner of some palace. Ingeniously, the story is written in such a way that no matter when you meet someone, it all still manages to make sense. So while the story beats and reveals are always the same, the order in which you and I will encounter them are going to be very different. I've really come to loathe a lot of open world game design because as worlds become larger and larger, the process of actually exploring them is all but removed. It's vast tracts of emptiness, copy and pasted townships and monuments, map markers and UI HUD guiding your every step so that you never even need to observe the space you're in, you just follow the marker. Any game that moves beyond that certainly gets a lot of points in my book, and the Forgotten City certainly did that. This is a small space, but it's dense, and you will explore it, and you will come to know it, and that's definitely one of the Forgotten City's biggest strengths. There's a little bit of combat in this game, but certainly not a lot. What there are, though, are puzzles, and these are interesting. They're never complex, but they certainly ask you to use the limited number of tools at your disposal in a creative way. Or they would, if the fucking solution wasn't whispered into your ear the moment you encountered the puzzle. Let me explain. Very early on in your journey, you'll start hearing the voice of a mysterious figure, communicating to you through the golden statues littered about the Forgotten City. At first, I thought this voice was just ambience, something to add to the scene and deepen the mysterious vibe. Eventually, though, I came to learn that this voice was sentient, and they did not have a lot of faith in my intelligence. At multiple times, I would encounter a puzzle and be like, okay, so let's take a breather, let's get our bearings, let's figure out what to do next. The normal thought processes we go through when a game communicates to us, hey, time to solve a puzzle. But no sooner are you presented with the puzzle than the voice says, here's the solution. I'm not shitting you, by the way. It just tells you what to do. And not like 5 minutes after you've explored and you're clearly stuck. Like 5 seconds after encountering a new puzzle, the voice is immediately like,
plug your controller into controller port 2. If you do that, he won't be able to read your mind.
I looked in the menus and there's no way to turn this off. This was a real deal breaker for me. It really pissed me off for 2 reasons. Number 1, give me some time to figure things out, please. Like, come on, have a little faith. It's like those annoying prompts when you die in a boss battle in some games, and they're like, did you want to reduce the difficulty, bro? And I'm like, fuck you, man, how dare you ask me that? That's how I felt when this game would tell me what to do. Secondly, I think this really wastes a lot of the potential inherent in a time loop-based video game. A time loop affords the player a lot of opportunity to experiment, to take risks, to get things wrong, to figure stuff out. The stakes are low because the cost of failure is typically just a little bit of time wasted. I expect time loop games to have puzzles that are more demanding, not less. I expect puzzles that ask me to come back to them 2 or 3 times in different loops to solve them because I couldn't figure it out the first time, or maybe I needed some item or specific piece of information that, I didn't already have. None of that has space enough to occur here because any kind of experimentation or discovery is immediately taken from you by the voice whispering the Konami code in your ear. That complaint is quite connected to my biggest disappointment with the game, and that's the way the time loop is used more broadly outside of just the puzzles. Like I said, this is a thing I'm really into and have been for a long time. Most of us will have played Majora's Mask and will have seen the power of a clockwork universe in a gameplay sense, where specific events take place at specific times, and you have to know those schedules to take advantage of them, being in the right place at the right time to engage certain NPCs or access certain locations. The Outer Wilds is one of the greatest video games ever made, possibly the greatest, but that's a discussion for another video. But it's unquestionably the most ambitious and complete implementation of a time loop in a video game. The entire solar system runs on a strict 22-minute loop where a planet crumbles into a black hole and meteorites orbit the sun before crashing into it, and one planet becomes filled with sand while another is emptied. Each of these events create unique windows, some as small as only a minute or 2, in which you can achieve things. I love this stuff because it represents a sort of Metroidvania of the mind. In time loop games, the player is made more powerful not through power-ups or MacGuffins, but by understanding the world more deeply and applying that understanding. The Forgotten City has its own time loop. You can trigger it in a specific way whenever you like, or you can wait until the end of the day when a specific event will trigger it for you. Waiting for that event is pretty much the biggest workout that the time loop mechanic gets in this game. NPCs do not have routines that need to be understood or exploited. There are no specific items only usable at certain times of the day. Similarly, there are no locations that are only accessible if you're there at a precise moment. The most a player will ever use the time loop for is to reset a failure state. What do I mean by that? Sometimes you'll say something to an NPC and you'll say the wrong thing to them and they get really pissed off, and at that point they just kind of shut down and they won't talk to you any further. If you need something from them, the only way to get it is to reset the time loop, at which point you can chat with them again, make some different choices, and keep things progressing. Now, this is a good thing, mind you. It's sort of what I was talking about before with the puzzles, where you're meant to get things wrong to the point where stepping back in time becomes the best solution, but that is honestly the most you will ever utilize this mechanic. This is a murder mystery of sorts. It's set in a small community of 20 people, each of them with their own secrets to keep. When I heard about this, I really imagined NPCs having secret rendezvous at certain times of the day that I need to spy on, or I need to trail someone as they go on their morning constitutional so I can learn about their proclivities, or carefully picking up an item that an NPC puts down for just a second because I knew when they were going to put it down and I could take advantage of that, and that allowed me to sneak into their house or something like that. Sadly, none of that happens, and all of the potential inherent in the time loop promise is wasted.
Up here on your right is the chasm. If you've got a weapon, it belongs way down at the bottom. Up on your left is the forum.
While the mechanics of the time loop are wasted, I do think it's utilized to great effect in the game's narrative. The Forgotten City is a fascinating place, and having met its inhabitants and solved the mystery at the heart of it, I'm not remotely surprised that this won an award from the Australian Writers Guild. Here's the setup: an ancient Roman city hidden away from the world in a deep yet sunlit cavern. There's only one way in and no way out. There's around 20 people that live there, most of them citizens of the Roman Empire just trying to live a life of peace and prosperity. They're incentivized to live these lives peacefully because if they don't, they all die. Upon arriving in the city, one of the first things you learn about is something called the Golden Rule. As decreed by the gods, the many shall suffer for the sins of the one. What this means is that if a single person commits a sin, then everyone in the city will die. It's an interesting concept and it's teased out beautifully throughout your playthrough. At first you begin to question the limits of it. Is it a sin to think an evil thought? What about tricking someone into a life of indentured servitude if they sign their life away? What about suicide? Is it considered a sin to defend oneself with violence if the circumstances call for it? The Forgotten City is a philosophical game, invoking the moralizing of Seneca and Ovid, the Stoicism movement, the ancient Greek mythologies of Hercules and his contemporaries, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. You're going to ask every single person what they think about this figurative sword of Damocles hanging over their head, and each one of them will give you a response, either for, against, or indifferent, with each of those responses grounded in the philosophy, politics, or spirituality that they most adhere to. One of the most interesting threads the game tugs at is the Golden Rule denialism, where the Golden Rule is used as a political wedge issue by a subset of people who don't believe the Golden Rule is real, and it's just a myth cooked up by the elites to pacify and control the population. If this sounds on the nose, I would remind you that the majority of the story beats of this game predate COVID, but it's funny how 5 years later, much of this game's core conceit can take on a new currency. Of course, the Golden Rule is real, and the mystery you're trying to solve here is that at the end of the day, someone breaks the Golden Rule, condemning everyone to a horrific death. You need to figure out who that is to avert the looming disaster, and the only way to figure that out is to walk up to complete strangers and just be like, "What's your story?" You literally ask that to every person you meet, by the way. It's a set dialogue option. Getting to know the residents of the Forgotten City is one of the best parts of the whole experience. Each of them is written so distinctly with their own personalities, backstories, accents, perspectives, and a complex web of relationships with everyone else in the city. There's no shortage of madness, honor, greed, virtue, compassion, or malice among the city's inhabitants. You'll encounter it all in the way they speak to you and speak about each other. And piecing together the game's mystery is really satisfying. There are 4 different endings to reach, all of them fulfilling in their own way, but the final true ending is particularly great, tying up all the loose ends exactly as you hope they would be. It's clever and surprising, and it pulls you in. That's the thing, right? This is a mystery game that pulls you into the mystery and gives you twists and turns and reveals that keep you pressing forward, and it finishes strongly. And if you do press to the end, I think you'll be pleased that you played this one. However, a lot of the shortcomings I listed earlier are going to make this a tough sell for a number of people. I had hoped for some great puzzles, and they were there, but they kind of got ruined by the whispering voice. I had hoped for a more ambitious implementation of that time loop mechanic, but that wasn't there either, meaning the game was far less clever than I think it could have been if the mechanic had been better utilized. In absence of those things, the Forgotten City feels like a narrative-led walking simulator when it could have been a lot more. However, just because it feels that way doesn't mean it's not good. I talked about the world exploration, the people, the story, the philosophical and political underpinnings. Those were all great. And bottom line, I enjoyed this. And when it comes to a video game, that's the most important thing. I really wish this was available on Game Pass. It would be perfect on that because it's very much a sort of suck it and see kind of game. Because I think a lot of people will be pleasantly surprised by this if they take a chance on it, but I think more than a few people who pay that $40 asking price might be disappointed with it. If you're still keen for this experience after this review, definitely grab it. If you're on the fence, perhaps wait for it to go on sale or hit Game Pass or an Epic giveaway or whatever. If you get the chance to take a chance on this, I recommend doing so because there's more than enough here to justify a little bit of risk. Finally, I just want to say that I think the modern Storyteller studio put together an experience that has got so much going for it, and if this is their debut outing, then sign me up for their next game because there's more than enough here to get me interested in what they're doing and their approach to game making, so I'm definitely down for more. That's my review. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I know to do better for next time. If you enjoyed yourself, consider subscribing, and if you really enjoyed yourself, maybe consider hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. You can see my patrons here on the left. They're awesome. They're amazing. If you want to join them, check out my Patreon page. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.